Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conscious Corner with Courtney. Today's conversation is a really meaningful one for me. Early in my legal career, I worked in family law, and I saw firsthand just how stressful, overwhelming, and emotionally charged the divorce process can be, not just for the individuals going through it, but for everyone involved. When emotions are running really high, decisions feel heavier, communication can break down, and even seemingly straightforward tasks can feel daunting. What I learned during that time is how essential it is for people to feel supported, grounded, and safe in the process, especially when there's so much at stake. Divorce isn't just a legal experience, it's emotional, it's financial, and it's something that impacts the nervous system in very real ways. And that's why I'm so grateful to be joined today by Melissa Murphy Pavone. She's a certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst who works as a financial neutral in the collaborative divorce process. And just as importantly, she brings mindfulness into the way she supports her clients. She helps people navigate the financial side of divorce in a way that can reduce overwhelm, it can support clarity, and it can allow clients to come to the table feeling more resourced and less reactive. So I'll let Melissa share more about her work and her path, but I'm really excited for this conversation because it sits at the intersection of money, mindfulness, and one of life's most challenging transitions. So, Melissa, it's a great honor to have you here with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Courtney. I'm honored to be here and I'm really glad our paths have crossed. And I feel, there's such a good energy connection that I can't believe we don't know each other our whole lives.
Well, it feels like we have, and I'm also equally as grateful to have been connected and grateful to LinkedIn for allowing us to connect in this way.
Yeah.
So, I would love to begin by having you share with listeners and viewers a bit about your path into financial planning and divorce work and what drew you to supporting people during such a significant life transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started my career in 2007 in financial wealth management and shortly after took my CFP exam to become a certified financial planner. And, while I was going through that process, I wanted to really help heal the whole person, right? It's not just investments. I'm not just an advisor, really, but like a financial ally. And I take that very seriously and the fiduciary responsibility to look at just so much more than just the investments. And while I was going through that process, I really thought about divorce and how giving advice and financial planning for a married couple is really different than the same advice, right? You would give a single person or somebody whose family is breaking up.
Mhm.
And I was a child of divorce. And so I always say my why is my mom. She made a lot of decisions with her heart and not her head.
Mm.
And it has impacted her ability to retire. And I think there's some regrets there. And she didn't have all the information, right? There was just sort of one path, just go to a lawyer and that was it. And the industry really has evolved, and I have really made it my mission to really work on that education piece and that
Mhm.
empowerment piece so that people really understand what they're signing and the long-term impacts that it'll have on their life. And it's really hard, right? When you're going through a divorce, you're grieving, a lifetime, a family, a relationship, all of those things. And you are forced to make very important decisions that are legally binding. And when you're in those heightened emotional states, you're not thinking clearly,
Right.
right? You can't see it. There's so many feelings. There's fear, right? There's sadness, there's
Mhm.
anger, there's grief, there's, sometimes regret or guilt. There's all of these things that people are feeling and they can't see what's really in front of them. And I
Yeah.
always say to my clients that I want to be their financial ally through this, right? And when they're trying to just get through the day, I'm really working to try and look at how these decisions are going to impact them 5, 10, 20
Hmm.
years down the
Hmm.
line. And they can't see it, right?
Right.
They just can't because they're in it.
I was going to say, they're so in it, and the emotions are so overwhelming that I think it's very difficult without someone in your shoes to, to be able to help them, or someone in my shoes to offer them some clarity. It's really difficult to even imagine your life outside of that moment. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
it
know
is.
that from our past conversations, I know, and just from the name of your businesses, I know that you are a mindfulness practitioner. And I think what you were saying about how easily we can get caught up in worry, that when someone is going through a life transition as impactful, as overwhelming as divorce can be, it's very easy to beat ourselves up for where we feel we went wrong. You mentioned your mother and maybe some regret. Like we can get caught in the past, and it can feed into emotions we feel in the present, such as regret, remorse. And then on the flip side, when we're in it, as you were saying, going through the process, we can have a host of worries of what's to come. A big one can be, even if we're in a supportive relationship, the financial piece can be incredibly daunting. So I'm interested, just based on your own personal mindfulness practice and your training, how that gets woven into the way you support your clients.
Absolutely. And it's a big part of it, right? The name of my firm and what I truly believe in. And I think that some people, right, take a pause and they're like, mindful divorce, like, is that an oxymoron? But
Yeah.
it's really not, right? Because there's power in that pause. And I say that to my clients because we have to pause. And sometimes they come to me and, depending upon where they are in the process, and they feel like progress has not been made, right? Because there's a lot of questions, and that unknown, right, is where that fear stems from.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shame too that they deal with. And I make it a priority to meet my clients where they're at, right? And to really say, like, this is where you are. I'm going to meet you here. And think of this as ground zero. From this point on, you're going to know more about your financial life, and you're going to understand what you own and why you own it and what we're agreeing to and what those impacts are. And I'm going to break it down for you, and there's no judgment, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter how we got here, we're here, and I'm going to hold your hand through the process. And I think that sometimes, like, you just hear that exhale to be
Yeah,
like,
I
okay,
I actually subconsciously, as you said that, and just the impact of having someone hold your hand in the process, I let out a relaxing sigh. So it's
yeah,
visceral. Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I think there's a lot of unknowns. And I think what I bring to the table is clarity,
Hmm.
and in a way that is non-judgmental.
Mm.
It doesn't matter how we got here, it's just where we're going, and wanting you to be aware of these things. So definitely the mindfulness, and whenever there are those heightened emotions, right, to just take that deep breath, right, and just sort
Yeah.
of let it go. Like, yes, acknowledge it, and just know, like,
Hmm.
okay, we're not making any decisions here, right? Let's just sit with this for a minute. If we have to reschedule, we're going to reschedule. But if you're not in the right headspace, then we're not going to make any progress. And I think just acknowledging that sometimes everyone's own sort of pace, right?
Hmm.
Not everyone heals. It's not linear. I,
Yeah.
I say divorce is like a roller coaster. There's no direct line to one day you wake up and you're like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
mad, sad, upset, angry, and getting a roller coaster of emotions. And it depends where you are on those, on that day, right? In that
Yeah.
moment. how you're feeling.
Yeah, and you mentioned three words that really stick out. One, the judgmental piece. And I think we can be so judgmental of ourselves, especially when we're experiencing something in life as significant as divorce. We can be incredibly critical of ourselves. So to have someone holding our hands and to hold a non judgmental space, that is a huge support right there in and of itself. You also mentioned that we can pause. I think the ability to pause is also a huge support system because we can say something in the process of the divorce that can cause the whole entire case to fall apart. I know we're going to get more into the collaborative process, but that pause can be the greatest game changer ever. And then just jumping back to something else that you said that I also want to give voice to, because I think it's just like the pause in that it gives your clients an amazing array of choices and opportunity, is the educational piece. To have a wealth of education and understanding of what your choices are, that's another powerful tool. So the education piece, the power in the pause, and then what was the other one that I first mentioned? But it just the non-judgmental piece, the non-judgmental piece with actually for those who are listening who are maybe newer to mindfulness, mindfulness is our ability to be aware in the present of our experiences. And John Kabat-Zinn, who created the foundational mindfulness program known as the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, actually uses the word non-judgment in the definition. He says that we're paying attention in the present moment non-judgmentally, and that makes a total difference in how we can experience the moments of our lives. So I love that you hold this non-judgmental space for your clients. I do want to break things down a bit more because I know that many people are familiar with litigation and how that plays out with regards to a divorce, but something that can really be incredibly supportive as well is collaborative divorce. So, for listeners or viewers who might not be as familiar with the collaborative divorce process, can you talk a bit about what it is and who's in the room, how the process works?
Yeah, sure. I often like to start with mediation because mediation is more of a common household name. And
Mhm.
when you're in the mediation process, both parties come to a neutral mediator who can be an attorney or they can be a non-attorney mediator, and they act as a neutral third party to help come to a resolution for the divorce. And that could pertain to all aspects of the divorce, and it could be part of the parenting plan, right? The financial aspects, and the legal aspects. While they are in that role, they are not, even if they're an attorney, they cannot give legal advice. So they can guide you as to what might happen in a court of law if there was a judge, or, but they cannot give you advice and they don't work for one party. And so it's sort of a neutral person to try to get both parties to come to the table. And mediation is a great resource. If there is there's not a power imbalance, right? And if there's not
Mhm.
financial literacy imbalance, if we have two spouses who are on the same playing field and understand all of the aspects of their life and sort of have full transparency, then it can totally work. And, it's outside of court. It's much more cost effective. It's much more time efficient. You can meet via Zoom. You can meet at late at night or
Yeah.
early in the morning. It's just two people and their mediator. When we talk about collaborative divorce, it's a structured team approach. I like to call it mediation on steroids. So it's for those families that need a little bit more than just one neutral party. And sometimes it's because of their asset level. Sometimes it's because they have children with special needs, right, that need a little bit more attention to detail for the parenting plan or the custody agreement. Perhaps it's there's an addiction in the family, and we want to be mindful, right, of somebody's recovery process while going through this process.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's a small business involved that is tied right to the family, and again, hard to dissect.
Mm-hmm.
So, with the collaborative divorce, each spouse gets a collaboratively trained attorney. So instead of just one neutral mediator, each person sort of has legal guidance in their corner. Now, these are lawyers, but they are collaboratively trained, right? So we are
Right.
not inside a courtroom. We are all signing an agreement. The professionals and the participants are all signing an agreement that we are not going to court, right? If one of us in the process threatens, right, or acts disrespectfully, or, then none of the work that we do can be used in court, and everybody has to sort of resign from the process.
Right.
So there's an initiative, an incentive rather, for everyone to stay outside of court and do this amicably, but in a more structured approach. Besides the two attorneys that each are helping their spouses sort of in their individual corners, there is a financial neutral, such as myself, a CDFA, who helps with the financial transparency, right? So instead
Right.
of your attorney going over your financial documents and then your spouse's attorney going over those same financial documents, one financial neutral who's hired by both parties and not working on one team or another, but for the family as a whole, will
Mm-hmm.
collectively review all of the assets. So we're looking at it from a different lens, which I think is very unique.
Yeah.
And then there is also a mental health professional who usually becomes the family facilitator. And that's really important when it comes to the parenting plan, and also just respect and, all of those things, and sort of guides the team. And so I love the approach of emotional, financial, and legal
Yeah.
together. So you have four professionals really supporting you and your family going through this difficult process.
So all bases are covered, and I know from the work from having worked in the family law sector and working in a firm that handled so many ends of the process, there's a very important document in the collaborative divorce process, and the process itself hinges on this document, which is the financial affidavit. And I know that we've talked about how heightened emotions can become in the midst of a divorce. So I'm curious if you can talk a bit about how this financial affidavit can impact clients, and how the work that you do not only offers ease to the parties going through the process, but the attorneys who are also involved in
Yeah,
the divorce
absolutely. Yeah,
process.
so some people call it the marital balance sheet, other, jurisdictions call it the financial affidavit, but it's sort of the starting point of the finances, but also the point at which it's also known as like fight, flight, or freeze.
Hmm.
And some people get into that freeze mode right away because it's rather long. There's a lot of questions, a lot of words, right, that you might not know, and you don't know all the answers to it. And they
Yeah,
sort of just hand it to you, and it's like, get this back to me. And it's sort of like getting a test in another language.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you're like, now what, right? Should I just stay married because I don't know how to fill this out?
right.
Um, and I will meet my clients where they're at, right, and walk through this with them. And oftentimes I fill it out with them because if it is just a conversation like, oh, hey, Courtney, tell me about this, talk to me about your house. Where's the mortgage? Do you have that statement? It's
Yeah.
a little less intimidating, right? Okay, we don't have it. Let's highlight it. We'll go back and we'll find it.
Hmm.
And then it will trigger. But if you get to a question, and this often happens, I've seen it, where you don't know the answer, you just freeze.
Yeah.
And you might not know the answer because it might not be applicable to you, right?
Hmm.
Like you might
Hmm.
not have this answer, or you might not know where it is. And that's where those feelings of shame, right, and guilt, how did I get here? How do I not know this? And we start beating
Yeah.
ourselves up.
Yeah.
And that's really where that fear comes from. And if we don't get that document right, we don't get full financial transparency, then we can never know moving forward, right? That if what we did was good, bad, or indifferent, right? Like
Mhm.
we need to have the facts there in order to move forward in a productive manner. And so I really help just walk through that. And once we sort of check that box,
Mhm.
you can visibly see like the weight lifted off somebody's shoulders, right? Like it is so crazy to me to do that, but it's so overwhelming. And I acknowledge that and I help walk through because there's just so much uncertainty and they think it's like a test, right? There's no like right or wrong answers, but you have to be honest and truthful and sometimes I can just look at somebody else's and be like the math is not mathing, right? Like we're something's not right here.
Yeah.
We have to like look into this a little bit more. And I think that's the value add of having somebody with that money, those money, that different lens, right, to look through. Like I know what I'm looking for. I know right off the bat if something seems wrong, right? And then I can sort
Yeah.
of dig into it.
Well,
Um,
speaking to just the lens and the perspective, I think your work as an expert from the financial end combined with your mindfulness training, you can help them get that more expansive perspective. When we're in fight, flight, or freeze, we close down, we contract. We can't get beyond our thoughts or the strong feelings that we have with someone like yourself who can guide us in the process, who can get us beyond the freeze and understand with the education piece, who can hold a non judgmental space for what's here, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever is here. That's what helps us get beyond that stuck point and gain clarity so we can imagine a better future. So that's really powerful, and I think is a testament to your understanding of mindfulness, your ability to weave it into the work that you do, your expertise in the financial end of the process. And what I'm wondering is, do you see a difference when you're able to offer these tools to your clients and have them step out of reactivity? Do you see the way the process unfolds in a very different way than if they didn't have these tools?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big difference, right? And you see the personal growth in it, right? I mean, divorce is definitely challenging and you grow as a human going through it, but sort of being on the other side as the practitioner walking this journey with somebody in a very vulnerable state.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen, even when I'm a neutral and not an advocate, clients stand up a little taller, right? Hold their head a little higher
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when they realize what's in front of them, right? And oftentimes when we present spreadsheets, right, it's just sort of like you see their eyes glaze over right away. I like look at them and I can see, okay, they're shutting down, right? This is
Yeah.
not computing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get that. And that's how I feel sometimes when, people start talking about tech or, like something that I am not well versed in. You sort of just like, "Eh,"
Mm-hmm.
and close down. And so being able to just sort of meet them where they're at and I really start from the basics of like, all right, show me your statement. Let's screen share. This is what the statement is. This is who the owner is. This is what this number means. This is the difference. If this said this instead, that's what it means. And I think they appreciate that because we're starting from the basics, right? And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, I knew that. Okay, that's good. And then the next statement, they're like, oh, I think this is, that right, you got it. We're doing it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I think this is the wrong statement, or I need another statement. I'm missing this. And so they're learning along the way. They're learning what I'm looking for. They're learning, what we have to present and what is material and what is not material. And I think through that process, they begin to trust again, right? Because it's really hard. And I really acknowledge that fact of, you with your spouse who you sort of were planning this life together, and there's a deal of trust, especially for the non-CFO spouse who's now like, hey, my ex, knew who the accountant was and knew who our attorney was and knew who the financial advisor was, and I just signed the tax return, right? Sort of
Yeah.
blindly.
Yeah.
And so we get rid of that shame and we say, hey, okay, do you need a new advisor, right? Do you need a new tax preparer? But like, this is what we need, and this is what we need moving forward. And as they become more educated, they become more empowered
Mm.
and they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they know, and this is like the greatest sort of compliment at the end, went to say like, I know now more about my finances than anything before, right? And to say like, I understand the deal that I'm about to make, or the barter I'm about to give up, and I understand that I'm willing and to accept that. And that to me is so much more important, right? For them to really truly see the long term and the big picture, because you don't want to make short term decisions. This is a lifelong contract.
Yeah. And it's a gift you give them to have a sense of agency in the process when otherwise they could be like a deer in headlights the entire time. And in turn, the gift you give to the attorneys involved by streamlining the process. So it's really a gift to everyone in the process. I have one last question for you because it's something that comes up in my own life, and I'm always interested in hearing how it comes up in other professionals' lives who practice mindfulness. But I know that in the work that you do, you deal with a lot of emotions, and the other professionals who are part of the process, that they're working in emotionally charged environments, combined with the fact that you and I are moms and we're juggling our own businesses. So I'm just curious how you practice mindfulness in a way that helps you to be with it all. Because if we're not in a centered space, if we're falling into reactivity, it's going to play out into the professional roles that we serve. So I think it's really important that we find a way to center ourselves, to decrease reactivity, and to be able to do that high level thinking that our clients need from us. So are there any tools, any practices that you use on the regular to help you ground yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a mindfulness coach, and she's wonderful. And I meet with her, but also I do meditation. I try to do it daily, and I don't beat myself up if I don't do it, but I can see the difference in myself if I don't have those 10 minutes to really center myself. I've tried, and it's not something I'm great at yet, keyword yet, but I'm working on sort of putting space in between my meetings so that I'm not running from one meeting to the next, because oftentimes I sort of need that like decompression, like get my thoughts out and then prep sort of for the next meeting and the next
Yeah.
client, to make sure I bring, I come with a full cup, and, I have, and I'm, ready to hold space for them to see where they're at.
Mhm.
And the other thing is I have a gratitude journal by my bed. So every night I just write three things that I'm grateful for during the day, to sort of end on a positive note. Sometimes this work can be really heavy, but it's also very, very rewarding. And so juggling that balance is really important. So to make sure that I'm filling my own cup up and making sure that I'm, being a good student and practicing mindfulness too is really important for me in my practice.
I think that's so important and so beautiful. And I'm noticing right now what I'm grateful for is to have this time together to share this conversation. So thank you so much for being on the show today. Before we go, I do want to give you some space to share with everyone ways they can connect with you if they want to learn more about the work that you do, or they want to connect to use them, to use what it is you do in the process they're going through, whether it's with collaborative divorce or mediation. So if you can just share for our listeners ways to connect with you.
Absolutely. My name is Melissa Murphy Pavone. You can find me on LinkedIn. My company's name is Mindful Divorce Partners. I do have a book coming out this spring, 2026, called Divorce by Design, with the premise of making sure you build your divorce team with that emotional, financial, and legal support so you feel supported through your divorce process.
I'm excited about that, so I'm going to keep a lookout for it. And then lastly, I just want to also say that I'm so excited to get the chance to meet you in person. We have the upcoming annual conference for the New York State Council on Divorce Mediation this spring,
Yeah.
so really, really looking forward to that and to sharing more about that with listeners and viewers. So thank you again for being my guest on the show, and hope everybody takes the best of care.
Have a great day.
You too.